today's event, and thank you so much for joining us all here today in the UK Pavilion on Energy Day. I know it's a really busy day, and just across the road in the other pavilion there was a big event happening on offshore wind, so I know some people have just joined us from there as well, but thank you for joining us here, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this event on bridging the gap from fossil fuels to clean energy. My name's Kate Hughes. I'm Director for International Climate Finance and Strategy in the UK Government, and I'm so pleased that you are all here today. And last year on Energy Day at COP26, we had 34 countries and 5 public finance institutions signing a statement making an ambitious commitment to end international public support for fossil fuels and instead to prioritise support for the clean energy transition. And in fact, I think that event last year in our pavilion was possibly one of the most popular in our pavilion last year as well, and it seems to be the same today as well. So thank you. And that statement was signed by both developed and developing countries, representing that united front and global momentum behind this really important issue. And this was an ambitious initiative in itself. Yet since the signatories made that pledge, the context has shifted. Russia's war in Ukraine has forced the international community to re-examine international energy security and have difficult conversations on sources of energy. But despite these challenges, the case for clean energy has never been stronger. And we have seen huge progress from statement signatories, some of whom we have with us here today, to speak to the actions that they have taken and will continue to take. And of course, reducing fossil fuels is only one side of the coin. The Glasgow Statement also commits signatories to prioritise clean energy as well. So not just one side and getting rid of it, but also really making sure we do the transition, the just transition towards clean energy as well. And in our panel discussion, we'll hear more from our partners about how they plan to do that. And we'll also hear from speakers about the challenges that remain in financing and deploying clean energy in Africa, as well as the opportunities that come with the clean energy transition. So I'm really looking forward to this event. I'm sure you all are as well, and how we can hear what's actually happening on the ground to make this a reality. Now, we were due to hear from Alok Sharma for this opening speech. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you'll understand, he's got slightly dragged into some negotiations, but I'm delighted to be able to introduce to you John Merton, who is the COP26 envoy. John.
Thanks, Kate. She said I got 4 minutes, so I've just started the stopwatch. It's great to see so many of you here at Energy Day. And I've been working on energy for nearly 20 years, since I was an energy attaché in the embassy in Tokyo. And over that time, I've accumulated 5 children. And the youngest of them is 1 year old. And in 15 years' time, when she turns to me and says, "Daddy, what did you do at COP26 to help tackle the climate crisis?" I'll say there were 3 things that I was really proud of that I was involved in. One was hosting a summit during the COVID epidemic so that we could get the world talking about climate again. The second was the announcement of the Just Energy Transition Partnership in South Africa, which gives a really concrete example of how we enable a clean energy transition, and really pleased to see another one announced in Indonesia today. And the third was the Clean Energy Transition Partnership that we're here to celebrate today, that shifts $28 billion a year from fossils to clean. And as Kate said, we couldn't have expected when we were in Glasgow that we'd see Russia invade Ukraine, and we couldn't have anticipated what that would have meant for the world energy economy and the short-term rush to secure our gas supplies to keep our homes warm and to keep the lights on. But don't confuse that short-term activity with long-term trends. If anything, Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine has seen an acceleration of the transition to a low-carbon, clean energy economy. We've set more ambitious targets, we've brought them forward, and we're continuing to deliver on our energy goals. The UK, in contrary to the narrative that is out there from some, the UK has not increased its coal generation. We're still at around 1.8% of energy in the UK, electricity from coal, and we're still committed to phase out coal power in the UK entirely by 2024. So the green energy revolution continues apace. And that's true for the implementation of the Clean Energy Transition Partnership as well. And you're going to hear from some of the countries that have come forward this year with really strong implementing rules to make good on what they promised at COP. Belgium, Finland, France, the Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland have all put policies in place. And we're really pleased today to announce that Guatemala have also signed up to the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, and we know also that Nepal have announced their intention to sign up by the end of the year. And that's really exciting, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But if your country hasn't signed the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, and if they claim to be a climate leader, please make sure that you leave this room and put pressure on your government to sign the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, because there's no use us spending money at home trying to make our emissions lower if we're spending money overseas supporting the increase in emissions overseas. Guatemala and Nepal are really important signatories, just as Ethiopia and South Sudan and some of the other countries in Africa and South America who signed the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, because they show that actually this is not just about a blanket ban on fossil fuels. That's not the case. There's been some articles in the press that suggest it is. The Clean Energy Transition Partnership and the UK's own regulations, and some you'll hear, have got really intelligent exemptions for things like cooking gas, the use of fossil fuels in humanitarian situations, and some exemptions for downstream gas power as part of the transition from other higher carbon alternatives. The Clean Energy Transition Partnership is not about pulling the ladder up after us. It's about building a new ladder up which countries can climb to get the clean, efficient, affordable energy that they need for their economic development. So really looking forward to the rest of the afternoon, and I hope that you will enjoy this afternoon, learn a lot, and take it with you outside of the room. And as I say, if your country hasn't signed and is claiming to be a climate leader, make sure you write to your MPs and your ministers and encourage them to sign along. Thanks.
Thank you, John. So a real call to action there as well. So a great way to kick off this event. And before we hear from our panelists, I would just like to invite to the stage Kofi Mbuk, who is Head of Clean Tech Research at Carbon Tracker, to give us a quick presentation on achieving decarbonisation in Africa using low-cost renewables. Thank you, Kofi.
Well, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we spend the next few days negotiating, persuading and finalizing a set of new climate commitments, as we must, it's easy to forget that the impacts of climate change are already being felt in the world today as we speak. Now, this year alone, we have seen extreme summer heats all across Europe, monsoon floods in the heart of Nigeria, Pakistan, and India. Wildfires have intensified in California, and we are now seeing stronger and stronger category hurricanes in the southern peak of the US. Now, last year alone, the global economic loss from disasters from climate change reached $271 billion, with over 10,000 lives lost. Now, had we been more proactive and reactive to the warnings of climate change, this damaged capital of $271 billion could have instead been used to build about 387 gigawatts worth of renewable solar power, enough to power the whole of Africa. Now, my dear colleague, there's no point in me preaching to the choir today because I believe we already know this. This direct impact of climate change, this is just the tip of the iceberg. But we must act now, we must be more proactive so we can prevent our future Earth from becoming a climate bubble. Now, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, he tweeted 2 weeks ago that there is no energy security without investing in renewables. However, we are seeing more and more European nations renege on their climate promises. And what's shocking of all is that Europe is now looking to Africa for natural gas supply. Now, this is an important message to the African government and African leaders right here today. Do not get misled. Now, gas supply contracts from Africa to Europe should only be seen as a short-term measure, a short-term solution to bridge the supply gap lost from Russia. Now, at Carbon Tracker, we believe that these gas infrastructure pipelines to Europe will eventually become stranded in the mid to long-term future, particularly on the newly announced $25 billion gas pipeline channel between Nigeria and Morocco, which links up to mainland Europe. Now, this will cause a major dent to the GDP of petrostate countries involved, especially around sub-Saharan Africa. Now, the solution for Africa is to turn its back on gas and start capitalizing on record low costs of renewable, particularly from solar. Now, Africa is blessed with abundant amount of sunlight, with an average annual solar radiance of over 2,000 kilowatt hours per meter squared per year, which is the second global highest amongst all 7 continents. Now, Carbon Tracker analysis further states that the weighted average levelized cost of electricity for new solar in Africa is now competing directly with the long-run marginal cost for existing coal and gas power plants at roughly $65 per megawatt hours. Now, what this means is that electricity utility companies can now sign PPA contracts with solar IPPs at a reasonable tariff rate. Analysis further shows that within the next decade, the levelized cost for solar and battery all across Africa will be cheaper than both coal and gas power generating assets, therefore opening up a channel of major investment opportunity to capitalize on the storage markets in Africa. But investing in solar comes with its own challenges. Most electricity utility off-takers in Africa are not liquid enough, therefore the question of credibility comes into play. Access to public finance is always a major issue, and the grid system in Africa is outdated, obviously due for a major revamp, and obviously social and environmental factors must be addressed in any investment planning stage. Now, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with the right policies and international support, particularly from unlocking public capital from development finance institutions, these challenges can be addressed. Now, government must make Africa's grid more efficient and mandate all utility off-takers to switch to a paperless form of collecting payment once bills are due to ensure their continued liquidity. Government must ensure that public and private finance will invest in Africa's electricity sector to expedite grid access to more than 500 million people without access to power. Government must also ensure that payment guarantees through the support of DFIs must be made available to most solar IPPs, not just a select few. And in conclusion, if we adopt these policies, Africa could scale up its cumulative installed solar capacity by more than 50-fold before the end of this decade, and over 400 gigawatts by 2050, which will, without a doubt, get Africa closer to energy security and prevent the great continent from becoming a climate bubble. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kofi. I mean, I think, as you said, we kind of all know this, but it's always helpful to be reminded of the context. And I think, a graph can often, speak 1,000 words in terms of that transition and what's happening and the speed at which it can and needs to happen as well. So thank you very much for that. We're now going to turn to a set of fantastic speakers as well to give some perspectives here. So I would very much like to invite up here, we've got Stéphane Crouzat, who's Ambassador of Climate Change Negotiations, Renewable Energy and Climate Risk Prevention of France. A job title nearly as long as my own, but I think I still beat you. Please come up. Daniel Westlen, who is the State Secretary of Swinland, thank you. Jan Wolberg, who is the Climate Envoy from Finland, and Minister Rob Jetten from the Netherlands. So thank you. We're going to hear from this panel now, and let's go in this order. I'm also just going to say, so we've got microphones. This is a really busy room, which is fantastic. It might be that if the sound doesn't quite work, we might just need to clear a little bit of room through to our antenna there. I know you might have to kind of shuffle up, but I'm sure we'll all want to hear what's being said. But let's give it a go first and see if it works. Stefan.
Thank you very much. Is that good? Yep. Thanks a lot. Thanks for organizing this very good event. I like looking at John because I remember the same time about 365 days ago at COP26, John was nagging me every single day about the statement on international fossil fuel and was saying, well, you know, is France going to join? And I kept saying, well, you know, we've got our own schedule. We're going to phase out export credits in 2025 for oil and 2035 for gas. And okay, and that's that. But that was not counting with the obstinacy of John. And also it was not counting with the fact that it's all about acceleration. So by the end of COP26, we realized that this timetable that we had given ourselves a few years back was not tenable. And so we signed that declaration, and now I'm happy to say that in the next budget, the financial budget for 2023, we are going to ban all export credits for all fossil fuels as of the 1st of January 2023. And it's, as I said, it's all about acceleration. Let's take another example. ZEVs, zero-emission vehicles. Back in 2017, we said we're going to, in 2040, ban all new thermal vehicles. And at the time, it was seen like, you know, as if something out of the moon was coming down to Earth. And now we're talking about 2035. So things that seem impossible or seem completely way off become the norm. And now, you know, 2035 is going to be when in Europe we won't have any ZEVs. Just going back quickly to the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, we signed it and we made sure that in ECOFIN, in the European Union, we got a clear definition of what we meant by export credits, banning them, and so it's going to be all throughout the value chain, upstream, middle stream, downstream. So it's very important to have a common reference. We're working also within E3F, the Energy Finance for Future group, to try and, you know, push everybody to join that statement and that commitment. So I think there's still a lot of work to do. But honestly, 365 days ago, I didn't think we'd be where we are now, and that's very, very encouraging. And John, you're part of that success. Thanks.
Hi, I wasn't here a year ago, but I'm very glad to be here in the birthday celebration today. Sweden and the European Union are among the world's top providers. You're like this. Can you hear me now? So, Sweden and the European Union were among the top providers of the world for climate finance to developing countries. We're contributing to mitigation as well as adaptation. We remain committed to mobilizing international climate finance as part of the collective developed countries' goal to jointly reach at least $100 a year. So I repeat that, we remain committed to that. Not investing in fossil fuel-based activities has been the point of departure for Swedish aid since the adoption of the Climate Policy Action Plan in 2019. Climate and environmental considerations are being integrated in all development cooperation. So we're almost done in lining up the Swedish aid with the Paris Agreement. Public funding and mobilizing private sector finance are both necessary. In our national development assistance, we have used guarantees to stimulate private investments in clean energy. Funding needs for energy investments are enormous. It's crucial to work with international finance institutions like the multilateral development banks, given the scale they can provide and the convening power in mobilizing private capital. we continuously advocate the phasing out of investments in fossil fuel activities in our discussions with these banks. Rather, investments have to be directed towards clean energy that may be expanded sustainably, the three most important being photovoltaic, wind, and nuclear. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. I'll also start with remembering what's happened at COP26 and John's team. There were many exciting moments. One was Finland joining the Forest Land Use Declaration, and one certainly was the Clean Energy Transition Partnership. They call me the climate torpedo in Helsinki because as a climate ambassador, I try to influence the different line ministries that they would come along to the climate work. So I think you can do the same in your respective ecosystems. I think it's worth joining Clean Energy Transition Partnership, and I'm glad to hear from John that there are more countries joining in. I'll use my 3 minutes only because like Stefan mentioned, Finland also, Finvera, we have a brand new policy from September that we will basically ban all finance starting from January. And it's not a blanket, like you said, there's no need to be afraid that it's kind of banning everything. So I'll go through a little bit what's our promise, so to say. So the Finland's official export credit agency Finvera published this policy in September, and it's going to be in force starting in January. And it means that it will not be accepted any new oil gas fields credits, and there's only few exceptions, and also significant exceptions of the old ones or any fixed infrastructure related to them, such as construction of pipelines, will not be accepted. So more, if we go to the what's accepted part, it's exceptionally oil-fired power plants that act as reserve power plants or secure isolated networks in remote areas. That still we think that sometimes it's needed. Or in respect of gas-fired power plants, export credit guarantees can also exceptionally be granted for plants that produce balancing power for renewable energy, or those that replace production with higher emissions. So there are some qualifications, of course. It will be very meticulously reported case by case when we approve the projects. So that's kind of that it has to be proven that the project is consistent with the 1.5 degrees line. So that's very challenging job, and we are aware of that, but we are willing to take the challenge. One useful tool for us here has been the E3F. I always had a hard time with E3G, so we have another difficult acronym. That's Export Finance for Future. And I think it's been very useful, the working shops that have been going on, and we have been able to kind of exercise what we need to do as Finland. So huge thanks for British government, not only for the ECTA, but also for the Export Finance for Future. And I think, lastly, I think this needs to be done in a very transparent way. We have been having discussions with the NGOs and having a national dialogue on this, and make kind of the Finnish companies aware that what we are doing is significant and it's important. I'll stop here.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I was not present in Glasgow, but what I know is that there were actually two reasons why the previous Dutch government joined this partnership. Because it was a government at the end of its term and it didn't know what to do with you, John. And I've been told by Prince Jaime, who is our climate ambassador, that you were pushing the previous Dutch government to join this partnership. Pretty good. But there were also young climate activists from the Netherlands that were also pushing the previous Dutch government to join this partnership, and luckily we did. I have been the Minister for Climate and Energy ever since January 10th, and together with the new government we focused on two issues in the light of this partnership. First of all, it was more public financing for the green transition, and not just in the Netherlands but also in our international collaboration. And I'm really happy that you invited Kofi, and thank you for your very insightful presentation at the beginning of this session, because if you take a look at the map, there is so much potential in Africa for renewable energies, and come on people, just make it work, let it happen, make it happen. So the Dutch government is investing another $100 million in supporting developing countries in integrating renewable sources in the energy grid. We will join the German initiative for H2 Global so that we can invest in green hydrogen projects worldwide. And let me be very clear, I only want to invest in green hydrogen projects in Africa if the local community is also a beneficial of these projects. We have pledged another $70 million for the DARES initiative by the World Bank so that 300 million people get access to decentralized renewable energies on the African continent. And we're also working on more bilateral energy cooperations with developing countries so that we can share our knowledge and share our expertise in, for example, offshore wind parks so that other countries can also speed up their energy transition. The second priority in light of this partnership is, of course, the export credit financing. And we've done several things. First of all, we've increased our risk tolerance to green transition projects worldwide. There were a lot of Dutch companies willing to invest in green transitions projects abroad, but they were facing difficulties getting the credit financing in place. So we've increased the risk tolerance. And I think in light of what France and Finland, have just stated, also the Netherlands will not accept any new applications from the 1st of January 2023. No new applications for unabated fossil energy projects abroad, and only allowing investments in existing fossil infrastructure if it results in concrete benefits for the environment, for safety, or for public health, without prolonging the infrastructure economic lifeline. And I think the ECOFIN initiative was very important to make sure that most European countries that signed for the partnership are moving in the same direction at the same time. So thank you also for the French presidency in the first half of this year. Very happy to hear that Guatemala and hopefully also Nepal is joining the partnership. But I would like also to call upon everyone that already signed. If you have bilateral talks during this COP and you're having talks with a country that hasn't signed up for the partnership, do not leave the room before you ask them to join the partnership, and otherwise send John to them. Thank you very much.
Well, a huge thank you to all of you for actually, I think, really galvanizing this discussion and for the commitments that have been made here as well and over the last year. I mean, you know, and Stefan, you started with saying we're doing what seemed impossible. I think, 2-3 years ago, I don't think we'd have thought we'd have got where we are now. But we've heard a lot of pressure. We've heard a lot of the evidence. We know that we are looking each other in the eyes and pressuring each other, that lots of different countries are putting this pressure on us, that our youth groups, civil society, businesses, economists, our own finance ministries are also looking at us as well, and we're responding to this. And I'd like to ask you to put your hands together and thank this panel for your words and for your optimism and for what's been achieved, knowing that there is more to be done as well. And yes, let's put pressure on those who haven't yet signed up as well. So a huge thank you to everyone here. And now we're going to move on to our next panel as well. We all know it's really busy on Energy Day. There's so much happening. So we're going to get into a little bit more detail here, and I've got a great second panel for you all as well. Remember, when you come up, you've got to channel your inner karaoke person and hold that microphone up and close as well. So I'd like to invite up Julia Beck, who is Chief Strategy and Impact Officer of UK Export Finance. Edward Okot Omoya from the East African Development Bank. State Secretary Stefan Wenzel from Germany. And I think that Minister Collins from Zambia is not with us at the moment. He is chair of the LDCs group, and so kind of understandably is deep in negotiations as well. He was just with us for an excellent talk on sort of just energy transition partnerships, and I know he's going to try and get back if he can, but you'll understand that it's very important for that group to be working and for him to be chairing that as well. So huge thank you to my panel. And actually what we're going to do now is we're going to put a few questions to them as well. And I'm going to start off by kicking off, I think, for sort of on the donor side, and Julia and State Secretary as well, just to kind of reflect on the real world actions that your institution is taking in order to sort of implement this shift that we're talking about today in terms of the financing. What does it mean to shift public finance from fossil fuels to clean energy? And what impact do you see that having on the ground? And Julia, maybe we can come to you first.
Thanks so much, Kate. Is the mic working? Brilliant. Okay.
Now hold it, I think, a little bit nearer.
Very close. Okay. Really channeling my karaoke practice here. So, I think for UKEF, we've very much been at the heart of the UK government's implementation of the statement, and it's really come down to the kind of the core of our purpose as a public financial institution. So our mission is to advance prosperity by ensuring that no viable UK export fails for lack of finance or insurance, doing that sustainably and at no net cost to the taxpayer. So then on prosperity, we already know that there are more jobs in renewables than there are in fossil fuels, and we're looking at a net gain of 22 million jobs globally.
Do hold it really close and speak up. So
really struggling. Okay, there we go. And in the UK alone in 2020, we saw 41 billion in revenue from clean and renewables companies, supporting 500,000 jobs in the supply chain. So it's absolutely core to economic growth. There's a huge export opportunity that we can help open up. So 12 trillion in annual sales by 2030 across key clean growth sectors driven by net zero demand. Sustainability, we know that supporting fossil fuels is not compatible with the 1.5 pathways, and no net cost to the taxpayer. So it's not fiscally responsible to be continuing to lock the world into climate change, which is why we launched climate resilient debt clauses for our direct lending last week. So what have we been doing? So in addition to the fossil fuel policy, that means we're no longer supporting fossil fuels overseas, except for very, very tight exemptions. We have also published a climate strategy committing us to net zero across our portfolio and operations by 2050. We have published interim decarbonisation pathways to 2030, covering 40% of our portfolio, and we'll be publishing our aviation sector pathways this financial year. And we've also been pivoting our business to support clean growth. So we've been developing green and transition products. We have been implementing a 50% target for renewables and transition projects in our business development pipeline, so opening up those opportunities for UK businesses. And we've also been growing our capability in this area, so recruiting and developing our capability through a new renewables and transition underwriting team. And I am pleased to confirm that there is in fact life after fossil fuels for export credit agencies. So last financial year we did 7.4 billion, so the second highest in about 30 years, having just implemented this policy with not a penny going towards fossil fuels overseas. We have we've also been named the #1 export credit agency for sustainable deals, and what we feel is that we are gaining a competitive advantage from our leadership in this space. That is a competitive advantage that we are keen to share with other signatories, so really encourage others to join us here. And we're keen to see progress on the enabling environment. There are OECD negotiations going on in parallel this week, and hopefully we'll see some clear progress on modernising the climate change sector understanding for export credit agencies, and also on improving the terms under the arrangement that we're able to support for these projects.
Great, thank you very much for that. And I love this sort of idea of competitive advantage, but wanting to share that, because we all know we need to kind of work together and collaborate if we're going to transition and deliver the transition that we all need. So thank you. And Stefan, maybe you'd like to also reflect on what this means in Germany in terms of the measures that you're taking in terms of the financing for fossil fuels and the impact that it's having and how you've approached it.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you very much for invitation for this panel here and this interesting discussion. For Europe and for the whole world, Russia's war of aggression was a really big threat. It violates the UN Charter, which is the base for our relationship all over the world to live in peace together. And that was also, there was we were afraid that there would be maybe a renaissance of fossil fuels because of this. But on the contrary, accelerating the global energy transition, that is renewable energies and energy efficiency. And it is the central strategy for several goals: compliance with 1.5 degrees target, independence from fossil fuels, and independence from fossil fuels suppliers. And we realized in February what could happen when the Russian war against Ukraine started. Just 2 weeks later, the European prime ministers came together and they said, we want to strengthen the energy efficient goals. We want to strengthen the goals to build renewables. And we want to build up energy sovereignty. And so I'm hopeful that it's going in this direction. And in Germany, we strengthen, for example, new laws to accelerate wind and sun and hydrogen projects, and our partnerships with a lot of countries all over the world. Germany is committed in Glasgow and at the G7 to end international public financing on the unabated fossil fuel energy sector by the end of the year, except in limited and clearly defined circumstances, especially for gas as a transition, and in line with the 1.5 warming limit. We stand by this commitment, and we will implement the commitment from January 23. This allows for limited exemptions, but only to the extent that they are consistent with the Paris Agreement and the 1.5 degree target and do not cause carbon lock-in. We stand to this commitment, and we are currently coordinating in the government how to manage it. And I think it's really important that we go on here and that we accelerate the transition, for example, of our industry. We want to decarbonize steel making, production of fertilizer, production of cement, and all these industries which produce a lot of CO2. And we are hopefully to work together with our partners in Europe and our partnerships all over the world.
Thank you very much. And I think it's always interesting to hear about, this is a challenge for countries kind of, domestically and what we're doing ourselves as the UK, as Germany, but also what this means for what we're doing internationally and the support that we give to other countries as well in this transition. And Edward, maybe I can turn to you on this point as well in terms of your experience from the East African Development Bank. What does it feel like from where you're sitting? What support is needed? How do we remove those barriers? What's kind of the best practice that you see in terms of this transition and the financing that goes alongside it?
Thank you very much. The East African Development Bank is a bank located in the heart of Africa. Our head office is in Kampala. We serve 4 member states at the moment: Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. Our objective is to support socio-economic development of the region. So in terms of this signatory, we have committed, knowing the impact of climate change. The science is clear. What we are seeing in the region is heartbreaking. When you look at northern Kenya, for example, people are dying because of drought. When you look at Uganda, my country, where I come from, in Karamoja just last week, we were shocked by the number of people who died, and even the mudslides and landslides around eastern Uganda and western Uganda. So we cannot, as a bank, look at what is happening, because our heart is for the people. We care about the people. What are the challenges are we facing as a bank? We need technical support at the moment, because this is a new policy. We have a climate change policy which needs to be reviewed. So we are already in the process of reviewing, and we are working closely with the UK government. We are also working on our exclusion list. Our exclusion list at the moment does not cater for not funding fossil fuels. So we need to integrate that into our exclusion list so that we don't finance fossil fuels anymore. And also take note of what the training will help the entire staff of the bank. We also need real finances, because we have already tested that the green funding works. We tested with a conglomerate of other DFIs, international IFIs, on the famous Lake Turkana wind power project. So there are already impacts, positive socioeconomic impacts. About 2,500 people were employed during the construction phase. They are supporting a number of schools and hospital projects within the locality. They are also helping out in the construction of other facilities like roads, supplying water to the people. So we really need to support this initiative. There is no way we can go ahead as a DFI without supporting this signatory. Finally, what I would want us to do also is to encourage our financial institutions. We have our DFIs who work with us. So all of them, through our initiative, we want them to sign up. When they sign up, they will be able to also move with the vision of transitioning from the fossil fuels to renewable energy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Edward. And I think that message about there's no way forward for a DFI unless you are part of this and you are signing up to its principles. And again, kind of another call for everyone to join us at being part of this initiative and signing up and making this commitment as well. And also reminding us at the outset about the urgency of this and that people are dying. And I know that Minister Ndzovu from Zambia isn't able to join us right now, but as I said, he was just on an event now, and he was also talking about the impacts in Zambia, in his country, about the droughts, the impacts on people, but also the potential of renewable energy to bring that both decentralized and large scale. So I'm sure he'd be saying all of those things too, and he ended his last speech by saying, we are ready for you. So I think that's also a message of, yeah, we need now to come together and to make sure that we are working together and in this transition away from fossil fuels and into clean energy as well. Now we have a little bit of time, and if the panel are happy, and I know there's also, we've still got some speakers from the first session here as well, and they may want to join in, and I know we've got a big audience here as well. We've got a bit of time for some questions as well. So if anyone wants to ask some questions, what I might do is maybe take 2 or 3 and then come round and put them to our panel. And I'm hoping someone is ready to run with a microphone as well so that we can hear those. Here we go. Okay, I've got a lady at the back. We've got a front row and an audience. Let's take those 3 first of all, and then we'll come back round if there is time as well. And to my distinguished guests on the front row too, if you want to sort of join in on any answers too, please feel free. And if you could say who you are and where you're from, that would be brilliant.
Sure. So my name is Laurie van den Berg, and I work with Oil Change International, and I'm from the Netherlands. First of all, thanks so much for this interesting event and all your very insightful contributions. I have a question for Stefan Wenzel from the German government. So today we've heard from a number of countries about the policies that they've adopted to implement the pledge that they made last year to end finance for fossil fuels. We have heard that countries that have implemented the pledge have put a full end to financing for upstream activities, a full end to financing for midstream activities, including LNG infrastructure. And we've heard that countries are seeing that this is the way to respond to the energy crisis, and that we need to accelerate the clean energy transition to effectively respond to the energy crisis. The German policy has not yet been published, and we've seen some concerning signs of backsliding on the pledge, with the suggestion that there is a need for continued investments in gas in response to the war in Ukraine. And I wondered if you could comment on this, and if you could also tell us a bit more about the process that Germany is working through to adopt a new policy and when it might come out. Thanks.
Great, thank you. If I take two more questions, and then so that was quite a specific question there as well. I think if the gentleman here on the front row.
Hi, I'm Joram Schaver. I'm Director Impact ESG from the Dutch Development Bank. We're one of the early signatories to this pledge as well. Maybe first a brief comment. I want to give a shout out to the UK government for actually holding the pledge. I think with these pledges, typically you see a big splash and then you see what happens. But I think you've done such an amazing job at following up with technical sessions and keeping the energy high. And I think that really speaks to the success of the pledge already 1 year in. I think also for our side, we're well on track. We don't have any fossil projects anymore in the pipeline, so I think we're right there. In terms of a question, we're in the market every day in Africa, and when we speak about what we're stopping on the fossil side, we notice it's absolutely critical to also have a very good story around what we're starting, especially with Europe going around not only buying gas but even buying coal these days in Africa. I think that's an absolutely important part of also making this pledge work on the ground. So my question is what the panelists are doing in terms of starting new things and delivering actually also on the promise of driving more renewable finance and also grid stability, which I think is an absolutely critical part of making this all work.
Great question, because we know, the starting is important too, particularly if we're going to leave no one behind and deliver on SDG 7. And I think we need to run the microphone over here, and while that happens too, I should probably just touch on your first point too and say a huge thank you to all of the team who have been running these technical sessions, for everyone who signed up, so that actually we could make it a reality. So that's my own little personal thank you to everyone who's been working on that.
Can you hear? Okay, great. Thank you very much. So my question is also for State Secretary Wenzel. So you had mentioned that Germany's policy. Oh, I'm sorry, Steve Hers with the Sierra Club in the United States. So you had mentioned that Germany's policy has a very narrow exception for fossil fuel finance, gas finance in particular, only where it's compatible with the Paris Agreement 1.5 degree target. And there's a lot of analysis out there that shows that no new gas is compatible with 1.5. So I'm curious how you are defining what 1.5 compatibility means.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got 3 questions there. Maybe we'll come to you first, State Secretary, because a couple were aimed at you, and then we'll also pick up, you might want to pick up the question on starting as well, and others might want to come in on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your questions. First, the situation when the war in February starts in Ukraine, we had a situation in Germany where we bought 55% of gas from Russia. And now, since 10 weeks, we stopped buying any gas from Russia. We have no more gas from Russia, but it was a very huge amount before. And so we have, I will say, 3 strategies to handle this situation and to have energy security in the next winter and the winter afterwards. We strengthen efficiency. So we need 20% less in the last 6-8 months. And we want to strengthen efficiency also in future time. So we use 20% less of fossil gas in the households on the one side, in the industry on the other side. And we are diversifying the demand. We try to build for this winter 3 LNG terminals for diversifying. And we want to use this LNG terminals in the future for hydrogen derivatives too, for example, green ammonia, so that we can import them over these terminals too. And we're strengthening the alternatives. We do it with the European Union about WePower EU. WePower EU will strengthen the NDCs of the whole European Union, and we're strengthening financing of solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, and hydrogen products to import green hydrogen or derivatives from hydrogen. So that is our goal, but it's a very difficult situation, and we therefore want to work very close together with the European countries and also with the countries in the MENA region, and we are hopeful that we can manage the situation, and we will be very transparent about that, what we're doing.
Thank you. Edward, Julia, do you want to pick up the question on what are you starting?
Well, from the bank's perspective, we are already looking at accreditation, first of all, with the Green Climate Fund. When we get accredited, the money we get from GCF and maybe any other partner will be focused on green projects only. So at the moment, we don't have any green project. We don't have any fossil fuel project on our pipeline. So that makes the bank already compliant to the transition. But now the challenge is we only need more money to explore more of the vast opportunities within the East African region. The potentials are there. We have talked about solar power, wind power. Green hydrogen is yet another potential that needs to be explored. So we are strategically positioned. It's good the Dutch government is ready to support. So we will partner with them as well to get some money to explore such opportunities. And our focus is, if we are to finance, the cycle should remain within the region, from the start to the end. So everyone must benefit up to the grassroots level. That is my take. Thank you.
Thank you. Julia.
So Africa is a huge focus for us strategically. So I think we did around 600 million in support in 2018 versus billions every year for the last couple of financial years. So we're already seeing huge uptick in volumes of support and demand there. 5 of our network of 20 overseas representatives are based in African markets. We are focusing on developing projects in clean growth sectors. So last year we supported 1.7 billion pounds worth for a Cairo monorail project, so in Egypt, and we also, the Minister Stewart on the last panel mentioned 27 million pounds in support for solar-powered clean water supplies. So a real range of types and scales of projects there as well. We can offer direct lending support for clean growth projects where there isn't the liquidity in the private sector, and we're also looking at how we can work better in partnership with partners across sectors. So the African Development Bank and other colleagues in the development and multilateral sector, and also the private sector. So looking at how we can be a bit smarter in how we're working together.
Great, thank you. I did see quite a few hands went up when I opened this up for questions as well. So I can see a lady here. Let's try and take 3 quick questions. Please say who you are. Try making a question nice and short. There's a gentleman over there and a gentleman at the back. Let's take those 3, and then I might, if anyone else from the kind of our front panel of speakers wants to do that, then can we, it's the lady here in the black top.
Hi. Is this working? Can you hear me? Okay, great. My name is Lee Ann Govinsamy. I'm from the Center for Environmental Rights in South Africa. So I'm quite aware that this has to do with public financing, and a lot of the discussion has focused on public financing. So today, Ergewald and about 33 other African NGOs released a report about who's financing fossil fuel expansion in Africa. And a lot of the banks in particular are based in the UK. And I speak about fossil fuel expansion. We're talking about gas, LNG terminals, as well as new coal mining. 49 new coal mines are being planned to be built in South Africa alone. So I just want to get a sense of, you know, how everyone is trying to tie this together. Like, yes, we can have the JETP in South Africa, and we can have public financing move towards renewable energy, but there does seem to be a bit of hypocrisy, and I think we need to be taking a more holistic view towards this, like the gentleman also raised around, you know, a lot of the addiction to fossil fuels and the justification for gas and coal expansion in Africa, in South Africa in particular, is based on European demand. So I just want to get a sense of what your views are on that. Thanks.
Great question. We're going to run the microphone over here. I think it was the gentleman at the back in the white shirt, and then another gentleman on the back with the blue jacket.
I'm Ryan from Glasgow, the host city of COP26. My question is very brief. I'm very patriarchy. I love Scotland in the context of the UK generally. But one of the big issues we have in Scotland is the northeast, Aberdeenshire, Aberdeen, and a lot of kind of the area benefits and its economy benefits from fossil fuels already. And the challenge of the northeast is taking the workforce with us in a just way, in a transition. So my question is, what are the panel's views on how we take the generation with us? Because often a lot of the people who work in oil and gas in the northeast are, you know, in their 60s and 70s and are about to retire. So what's the panel's views on taking those with us and knowing that we need to transition in a way that is just, and how we take the future generations with us as well, and getting that message out to the older generation that, you know, that we're in a climate crisis and we need to stop the finance for fossil fuels.
Thank you. And maybe if you could pass the microphone down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Samuel Okulony. I'm from Uganda. Basically, I wanted to ask Edward, I know that the East African Bank is very strategic in the region, but also you sit within the banking association within the country. I'm from Uganda. Specifically, we have had indications from Afri-Exim Bank that has committed funding for ECOP, of which you guys sit within the same committee. What specifically are you doing to ensure that they align their financing with what you are aligning your financing, especially for the climate-proof investments? The other is in regards to the German government. I know that there's a policy coming out. It's not yet out for German, but other countries have already made progress in regards to the public policy in limiting public support for fossil fuels. I know there has been a debate in regards to the challenges in regards to the Russian war coming in, and there could be backsliding. But the more you backslide is that we suffer more, like my brother has been saying, Africa suffers a lot of the impacts in the drought and the floods in our countries. What I would like to implore that you fasten the process and ensure that you align and commit to the commitments that you made in the Glasgow statement.
Thank you. So, look, 3 great questions there, and we are running out of time, and we don't have too long before the next event. So I'm going to ask for really brief responses, and I might ask John as well to come up and just answer the one about, sort of some of the private finance and banking as well. State Secretary, did you want to answer that last one first, very briefly?
Thank you, my brother, for asking that question. That is a controversial question that everyone is asking. Yesterday, when I shared with someone that I was coming to present today, they asked me about that very one. So as a bank, we have already signed. When you sign a document, when you become a signatory, you have to really play by the rule of the game. So there's no way we can go back to what we have signed for. We cannot really retract our signature. So we are going forward. As I had already mentioned, we are in the process of receiving training on how best to implement it. We are going to align our policy, the bank's policy, and also improve on our exclusion list not to finance any fossil fuel related project. So that is what the bank's position is. Thank you.
Thank you. Stefan, did you want to add anything on this and the policy, as well as the sort of the just transition point on jobs?
Yeah, with the job transition, I think it's very easy because I see much more jobs with renewables and transition of our industry with decarbonization and all this investment. And I would think what's important was if we're talking about financing renewables, and we see what we also see in the summer. We had very high prices for fossil fuels, especially in Europe, but also all over the world. And what we also see, a very strong interest in projects to produce green hydrogen. And when you see what you must invest and what you can earn if you go to a place where you have a lot of sun or a lot of wind, and then we have had an analysis for Europe, and we saw that we can produce for 90 euros per megawatt hour hydrogen in Europe on a place with a lot of sun or a lot of wind. 90 euros. And we saw prices for fossil fuels in summer from 200, 300, 350. 2 or 3 times as much. And then we must see what will happen in the next 5-10 years. We will see that the price for green hydrogen going down to 80, to 70, to 60, to 50 on a good place. And that is a break-even point. In 5 or 10 years, nobody will pay more money for fossil gas if we can get green hydrogen for 50, 60 or 70 euros. And everybody who is investing in fossil fuels now, he is in great danger of stranded assets in 10 years. So that every banker who thinks about that must think about the prices for hydrogen in future time too. And that's very important, and that's the reason why we must invest in renewables and in the future now.
Thank you. Maybe I could just ask John. John, I gave you 4 minutes at the start. You've got 30 seconds now.
Okay. Thanks to our South African colleague for a great question. So 3 things we're doing to try and address those issues. Firstly, trying to reduce the demand for hydrocarbons in Europe. So we're looking for less elsewhere, and the UK is at the forefront of that. We're going to decarbonise our grid by 2035. We're outlawing the sale of new internal combustion engines by 2030, so we're lowering demand. Secondly, lots of banks financing fossil fuels in London because there are lots of banks in London. It's a major global financial centre. Equally, we're at the forefront of regulation. So by the end of 2023, all public listed companies in the UK will have to make public their climate-related financial disclosures in line with TCFD guidelines highlighting the climate impact of their activities and the climate risks associated with the sort of investments you're describing. And we're already seeing banks in London saying they will not finance new coal because they're aware of the risk of stranded assets. And then thirdly, we're trying to create condensation nuclei for private sector investment in clean energy, and the Just Energy Transition Partnership in South Africa is a good example of that. $8.5 billion of public sector finance mobilized. We now need another $88 billion of private sector finance according to the investment plan, and hopefully the 8.5 provides a condensation nuclei where we can focus that private sector investment around.
Thank you. So listen, it's the end of the event. I'm really sorry that we've got to draw a conclusion here as well. Thank you all for coming. This is a really important issue, and it's really important that we keep on talking about it and acting on it. I think we've heard about how we are learning together. We're understanding how to implement this. We're pushing each other and keeping up that pressure, and that's really important. And we heard earlier, I think, let's leave you with this message that if you're in a bilateral, you're in a meeting, don't leave the room without getting that commitment from the people that you are talking to also join us in this push to end financing for fossil fuels. And then we need to act together. We need to make it a reality on the ground. Yes, it seemed impossible 2 or 3 years ago that we would be where we are now, but now it's not just possible, it's essential, and we need to make it inevitable. So thank you all very much. A huge thank you to all of our speakers and the panelists. And if I could encourage you to also move out of the room and continue your conversations outside. It's busy here in the UK Pavilion today, here on Energy Day. That would be appreciated. Thank you very much, everyone.